US Secretary of State was at pains to hold a straight face as he greeted his Russian counterpart, a smiling Sergei Lavrov, in Geneva this morning. The high-stakes meeting a culmination of 2 weeks of diplomatic efforts aimed at ratcheting down tensions while simultaneously warning Russia of the danger if it decides to invade Ukraine.
We are, all of us, equally committed to the path of diplomacy and dialogue to try to resolve our differences. But we're also committed, if that proves impossible, and Russia decides to pursue aggression against Ukraine, to a united, swift, and severe response.
An agreed form of words after President Biden's slip-up suggesting that a minor incursion by Russian forces in Ukraine would lead to disagreement within NATO as to its response. Neither side went into the talks expecting any resolution, and there was none. Just an agreement to keep talking and a commitment from both sides to put their formal responses in writing. Sergei Lavrov later described America's allegations of Russian aggression as blatant lies.
We do not expect a breakthrough at these negotiations either. What we expect is concrete answers to our concrete proposals.
Moscow's proposals are demands that Ukraine will never be allowed to join NATO and that the US and its Western allies pull back from Central and Eastern Europe. But the US has already rejected both of those, and while Mr. Lavrov again insisted Russia had no plans to invade Ukraine, the US Secretary of State said Russia's actions count, not its words.
I suggested to Minister Lavrov, as we have repeatedly, that if Russia wants to begin to convince the world that it has no aggressive intent toward Ukraine, a very good place to start would be by de-escalating, by bringing back, removing its forces from Ukraine's borders.
He's talking about this, the build-up of tens of thousands of Russian troops and heavy artillery on the border with Ukraine. Just this week, Moscow sent 2 battalions of surface-to-air missiles via train to neighbouring Belarus, it claimed, for routine military drills. And so the US is continuing to send arms to Ukrainian troops, seen here conducting military exercises in the east of the country today. This as America authorized the Baltic states to send its Stinger anti-aircraft missiles to Ukraine to help bolster their defenses. This Ukrainian soldier said he was grateful for America's help. It shows that we are not alone, that we have support. That's the message Antony Blinken wants Russia to hear loud and clear. But whether Moscow is listening or even cares is, for now, anyone's guess.
Well, earlier I spoke to Kusti Salm, who's Secretary General of the Estonian Defence Ministry, and Antony Gardner, who was the US Ambassador to the European Union. And I started by asking Mr. Gardner how relieved he was that the talking was set to continue.
Well, I'm relieved, but we're still in the first innings of what may be a long, drawn-out situation. The point I wanted to make up front is that Putin has already achieved many of his objectives. The first objective is to be talked about. Everyone's flying to Moscow, everyone's stroking his ego. Russia had been aggrieved for a long time of being ignored and perhaps being disdained. Now everyone's talking about them. So that's a tick. The second is that Putin's actions are leading to higher gas and oil prices, which are great for the Russian economy. He's seeking to divide the Western alliance so far with limited success, but again, it's early innings. And he's deflected attention from the domestic political situation, which of course is not doing well, and deflecting attention from a kleptocratic, autocratic regime. So it's a free option for him, in other words, by massing 100,000 troops on the border. Who knows what he's going to do next?
Kusti Salm, does any of that reassure you?
Well, to be clear, there is no reason for us to be relieved. We are facing the most serious security crisis in the last 30 years, potentially the last 70 years for UK. So unless there is no drawback in the Russian intention, there is no reason to be relieved. But clearly we look very positively, and we really cherish the allied efforts to be united in this serious times.
But Moscow's demands, even today, were that there should not be any NATO troops on Eastern European NATO soil, including the Baltic republics like yours. That is an impossible demand for you, isn't it?
Listen, we have counted down. There are 9 separate individual demands that Russia has presented on the highest level officially to NATO, to US, to all the allies. And they are not a threat as a package. Each individual demand has a catastrophic impact for Estonia. And as a package, it's murderous.
Antony Gardner, going back to what you said earlier, that Vladimir Putin wants to be talked about, he wants to feel relevant. Are you telling me that all these troops sent to the border, the language, the drumbeat of war, which has really got people worried in the last week, is essentially an exercise in relevance therapy?
Well, I'm not saying that he's not decided to do anything more. I'm saying it's a free option for him. I don't think he's a good chess player, but he's a very good poker player. And he doesn't think that the West is going to meet him at the poker table. And he's probably right on that. He plays asymmetry very well. He's made demands. We're right to make our own demands and to say what you put on the table is, obviously is unacceptable, as they know. We so far have been rather reactive. I think we need to be proactive right now, rather than preparing for events after a possible invasion. I think there are a lot of things we should do right now. For example, we could probably engage in cyber attacks through third parties to ensure plausible deniability, which is what the Kremlin has done, rattle their cage. We should probably be flooding Russian social media with a lot of information that's compromising and embarrassing about corruption at the highest levels of the Kremlin. We should be flooding Russian social media with details about Russian soldiers who were killed and wounded in the last invasion of Crimea. There are a lot of things we should be doing right now.
Kusti Salm, as someone speaking to us from the Baltic republics, used to be part of the Soviet remit, how vulnerable do you feel today?
Well, I said earlier that it's the most serious security situation in the last 30 years, so it's just not feasible to say that we feel very safe. No, we aren't. It's a very turbulent times. But at the same time, yesterday our government made a one-off 1% of GDP extra investment to our defense. We are speaking with Ukrainians. We are sending them weapons. We are, basically 24/7 into contact with our allies, including UK. And I really want to take this airtime and thank UK people. We have the highest belief in your leadership. We have 1,200 UK troops on Estonian soil, ready to fight. Every single Estonian knows that your tank is Challenger, your fighting vehicle is Warrior, what your uniform looks like. Our allied relationship is ironclad. So we are actually feeling safe, to be honest.
But if the Russians get their way, those British troops that you so applaud on your soil might have to be withdrawn.
So you think your government will go along with this discussion?
I have no idea. We have to ask them. I doubt it at the moment.
Well, we have asked, and there is immediate no. So we are not worried at all.
Antony Gardner, I think we should step back for a minute and just appreciate how extraordinary these conversations are. This is a potential reimagining of the entire security framework that has underpinned Eastern Europe since the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Indeed, I said earlier that Putin, I don't think, is a good chess player, but he's a great poker player. What did I mean by that? There are going to be some long-term consequences for him, which will be negative. Potentially, Finland and Sweden will reconsider and possibly join NATO. Defense budgets probably will inch upwards, not fast enough, but they will. Ukraine will be united in its hatred of Russia, which wasn't written, in the stars. It didn't have to happen that way. And sanctions may well, if there is a movement on Ukraine, if there's an invasion, they will be applied, and they'll be much more far-reaching than the ones that we applied in 2014. I was involved in those decisions. Remember, it took 6 months for us to move beyond pinprick travel bans and asset freezes to move to so-called sectoral economic sanctions. These would be much more far-reaching. So if he does something, it would be bad for him. And even if he doesn't, there are going to be some negative consequences for Russia.
And can you see Vladimir Putin's point, Russia's point, when it says, hang on, what about our security concerns as well? You've suddenly got all these NATO troops, on our border. We don't like it. You're breathing down our neck.
Yes, but why are they there? They're there because of the positions that Russia has taken. I have no sympathy for that narrative, to be absolutely clear. There is a fundamental right of sovereign countries to choose their path, just as the Baltic republics did, just as Ukraine did. Why did all those countries choose the path of freedom and democracy and the Western alliance? Because they wanted to escape the chilly embrace of Mother Russia. And it's very interesting if you look at the language that's used by Foreign Minister Lavrov and Putin. He thinks that Ukraine is not a country. It's a joke. It's controlled by the West. The real problem is that Putin regards the existence of a democratic, prosperous, and stable Ukraine as a fundamental threat to Russia.
And Kusti-san, finally and briefly, do you think that he sees your country, Estonia, in the same way?
Well, we think that they have made it very clear. All these demands are, frankly, being targeted against 3 Baltic states and Poland. They are targeted against wiping off the collective defense and wiping off all the, collective virtues that we have built here in the last, we were 70, for us 30 years. So there is no ambivalence here. They have made their claims very clear, and we have no reason to think that they are not serious.
Kusti-san, Antony Gardner, thank you very much to both of you.